How's it going, everyone? In this video, I'm going to go over 4 ideas for how to embrace who you are and where you're at in life. So, it's a fairly common feeling at some point or another in life to either feel like you don't like who you are as a person, or you don't like the progress that you've made in life, or your position, or where you're going, or the choices you made in the past, or all these different kinds of things, right? There comes a point for many people where they're able to look at where they're at now and where they could have been, or what they could have done, and feel like there's some sort of gap or some sort of mistake. So in this video, I'm going to go over a couple different mindset shifts or ideas for thinking about this sort of interaction that may hopefully help a little bit. These feelings are things that happen to quite a few people, and it's pretty natural. But there are a few tweaks we can make to try to look at things in a way that's not so crushing. So the first thing to really think about is that these choices or what we've done in the past to get to where we are now, they can't be changed, right? There's nothing that we can do by really sitting and dwelling on those choices and feeling bad about them. Now, we can, take it as an opportunity to learn the types of things that we want to do in the future. We can take some learnings out of those different choices and the routes that they took us on and where they led us, and we can use those to inform our future decisions. But we have to be very clear that no amount of feeling bad, no amount of reflection, no amount of dwelling on the past is going to change what has already happened. We have no influence over those choices in the past. We can only influence what we do moving forward. So that's one thing to really think about as you kind of think about your position in life and who you are and the choices you've made. You can't do anything about what you've already done. You can only move forward from here. Now, there's one caveat to this, or one extra point I want to make, which is we can make a lot more speedy changes than we think a lot of times. So a lot of people will think they're stuck in a career or a relationship or whatever else, but you hear stories all the time of people who have drastically changed their life by changing some of their decisions. So don't bog yourself down with this kind of like, well, I've made these choices, I'm stuck in this certain position, right? You may be in, whatever position you're in, but with effort and making different choices, you can drastically change your outcomes in a relatively short time. Now, the second way to embrace who you are and where you're at in life a little bit more is to recognize there's no right way to do life, right? A lot of times these feelings come with some sort of baggage around like, oh, I should have done this thing. I should have gone into this career. I should have started this family. I should not have started this family. Or these various different ways of thinking that you made mistakes or you really screwed up your life in a way that's irreconcilable, that you can't recover from. And this type of thinking doesn't really produce anything, right? And these ideas of how you're supposed to do life have to come from somewhere that isn't really like locked in, right? These aren't concrete facts about the way the world works. These are just ideas that we've allowed to get into our minds and stew. And then when we have these beliefs, they can really, really bring us down, especially if it's around things, again, in the past that we can't actually change. So, one of the things to think about as you're thinking about who you are and where you're at in life is kind of thinking about why do you feel bad about it, right? What is making you feel like you're not doing something right? So, for one example, maybe some people want to get married by a certain age, they don't, and then they say, like, oh no, I made this mistake and like I'm not doing it right. But there's no reason that needs to happen, right? This is just kind of like a desire in a lot of cases, or some sort of external idea that you've imposed on yourself. So spend a little bit of time digging into why you're feeling this way and try to remember there's no right way to do things. Everyone's life takes a different path, and being more open to these options and being more open to kind of the smaller points or looking at different ways that you can enjoy life and find satisfaction if some of those options aren't available is going to be more useful than kind of dwelling on, oh, I did things the wrong way. Because again, there is no right way to do things. Third thing, and this is particularly for embracing who you are, is recognizing the process around decision making and the process around becoming the type of person you want to be. So, what I see often in this realm is kind of this thinking that, oh, I don't like who I am because I keep making these certain kinds of choices. And I think there's actually a lot more flexibility in our outcomes than a lot of people believe because, they have repeatedly made the same kinds of choices and have the same outcomes. Now, that's not to say like, oh, everything is completely flexible, right? There are some traits, there are some things that are more fixed than others. However, this doesn't determine actions and outcomes. So let's take, for example, disposition to anxiety or depression, right? These types of genetic factors can cause you to feel certain ways, can push you towards acting in certain ways. But it doesn't mean you have to do that, right? There are other points that we can look at. We can look at kind of what's the environment, what are the decision points, what is causing me to do this, right? So for example, let's say if you don't feel good, you overeat. Well, that is maybe something that has bothered you for your whole life or something that you have done in your whole life. And so, as you've had those experiences, you've kind of related it to your identity. But there are probably tweaks to your environment or tweaks to your strategies that could be made to change those behaviors. So, what I'm getting at all of this is really look closely when you feel bad about who you are or having trouble accepting who you are. Recognize that only a few small traits are actually set in stone, right? Only a few things, only dispositions towards certain things are going to be a little bit harder to change. But within those dispositions, there's almost always a huge range of ability to modify that if you keep looking at tools, if you keep looking at ways to change your environment, change the people around you, or get extra help, from professionals or people who have some expertise in this realm. There's a ton of different options for changing those outcomes and changing the ways that you interact with some of those things that are a baseline. So here's another example. Like, let's say that there's depression, right? One person might interact with depression in a way that they say, oh, this is a part of who I am. I have to feel this way. I'm just going to give up and just let it run its course. And then there is another position which would say like, okay, I have depression. Sometimes it's going to come no matter what. However, I can take a lot of different actions to reduce the frequency of this feeling or reduce how often it impacts my life. And those two different mindsets and those two different ways of looking at it, one is a lot more fixed and saying like, well, it's just who I am. Like, this sucks. I hate this. The other part is looking at what factors are in your control while still understanding that there are some things that are not in your control and working around with them. Now, that applies to who we are more broadly, right? There are these things, these positions that we're in, these environments that we put ourselves in, these people we've surrounded ourselves with that we may have just found ourselves with, right? Not consciously chosen. But once we see that, we can start looking at the process and how to change the process, to change the actions, to change the outcomes. And that can give you a little bit more space so that instead of saying, oh, I don't like who I am, you might think, oh, I need to find some different ways to set up my life so that I can be more in line with the type of person I want to be. The fourth idea for embracing who you are and where you're at in life a little bit more is to think about how you treat other people and put yourself in the same position, which is to say that the vast majority of people are much more harsh on themselves, or if this is a problem for them, they are harsher on themselves than they are to others. And a lot of the times the way that you are non-accepting of yourself, you're very accepting of others. So let's say that you have problems with exercise, right? Like, you don't have a good routine built up, you don't know how to do it, you don't do it very often, you want to do it. If you had a friend or knew someone who was having that same sort of problem, you, for the most part, would not be like, oh, they're a terrible person, I don't like who they are, right? Same thing, if you had a friend who had, lost more muscle than they wanted to, and they're not in the position that they want to be in life, they're not making as much money as they want, it's unlikely that you would judge them and say, oh, well, the point you're at in life is just terrible, like, you should just give up. Instead, you would kind of look a little bit more naturally towards some of these solutions. And so, from an external perspective, it's a lot easier to see these problems more clearly and their solutions, as opposed to getting kind of tied up in the minutia and the details and the emotion and losing a little bit of perspective. So that's the last thing I wanted to cover, is just kind of try to think about it from this perspective of like, how would you treat someone if they were in your shoes? And most of the time, it's going to be more kindly than you're treating yourself. And if you think about that, then that's not really a fair perspective to take. All right, so that's kind of the 4 different ideas. As always, I like to include a couple reflection questions. So for this video, they are the following. 1, how do you feel about yourself and your position in life? 2, what actions can you take to make your future life better? 3, how often are you dwelling on the past? So hopefully that gives you a couple of ideas, things to think about, ways to start dismantling this frame of not really embracing who you are or where you're at in life. That's all I've got for this video. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, put them down in the box below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And I will see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.